3 media questions, and then 2 or 3 questions for the audience. So get your thinking caps on, please. And if you think I've failed to ask the right question, and you think the media's failed to ask the right question, feel free to go for it yourself. Okay? And then we'll wrap up. So, lots been going on. It's been a busy few months. It's only been 5 months.
Not even 5.
Not even 5 months, which is quite remarkable. Obviously, during particularly the last 2 months, there have been kind of 3 key moments in terms of the big investment summit, where there was a lot of talk about growth and getting that inward investment. There's been the budget, and then obviously recently also your Mansion House speech, where you've talked about pension reform and again about investment in the future of the economy. So when you look at those 3 big set pieces, when you look at them together, what are your reflections on how you've approached it? How well do you think we in the media have understood the messages that have come out for it? And then maybe even more importantly, how is it we and you should measure success coming from those events and those promises and those pledges and those plans?
Well, thank you very much, Keith, and thank you to Rain and the team for inviting me along today to your conference. The first thing that I did as Chancellor in that first week was to announce a number of things that we would be doing to grow the economy. So in the first week, we announced reforms to the planning system, and we called in a number of planning decisions on data centres, on wind farms and on housing. We ended the effective moratorium on onshore wind, and I announced a review of the pensions system to try and unlock that long-term patient capital so that start-up and scale-up businesses can grow and stay in Britain. But also in that first week, I said that we were looking at the public finances and the inheritance that I faced as Chancellor of the Exchequer. And I think everybody knows that that inheritance was pretty dire in terms of the black hole in the public finances. And so at the budget in October, I did have to make a number of difficult decisions. But if I hadn't have made those difficult decisions, then we wouldn't have been able to bring the stability back to the economy that is desperately needed. And sort of think about the people who are here today, and there will be times when you've gone into a business, perhaps as chief executive or as CFO, and you've found that the sums don't really add up and that you need to take quite drastic action to put the company that you work for back on a firm footing. And that's what I did in the budget in October. And we have now drawn a line under the inheritance that I faced. Public finances are now on a firm footing, and also our public services are funded in a proper way. And we've now set the envelope for those public services for the rest of this Parliament, which means we're not going to have to come back for more. And I guess that's the other thing, that in the budget in October, there's sort of 3 things that I could have done. I could have continued to sort of fiction and try to wipe it under the carpet. I could have said, well, I'll do a bit now to put the public finances on a firm footing, and I'll come back next year and do the rest of it, or I'm going to do it all at once. And again, thinking about the jobs that you do and the businesses that you run, I think all of you are probably most proud of the times when you've actually dealt with the problems you faced, and that you're pleased that you've done that early in the job so that you can then move forward. And that's what I did in the budget in October. Now, look, there's a lot of feedback about the budget, and I expect I'll hear more of it in the room today. I've heard a lot of feedback. What I haven't heard are many alternatives. And we had to put the public finances on a firm footing to bring stability back to the economy. That's what I promised when I was Shadow Chancellor, that I would never play fast and loose with the public finances, because when you do, it's ordinary families and businesses that pay the price. So I've lived up to that promise, returned stability, drawn a line under the fiction in the public finances, put our public finances on a firm footing, which means now that we've got that bedrock of economic stability from which we can begin to grow our economy and return growth and productivity and investment to the economy. And that's why whenever there's been decisions that aren't about making the sums add up, I think you can see that I've always prioritised growth, whether it's on planning, whether it's on pensions reform, Whether it's our commitment to reset our relations with the European Union and boost trade, whether it's the plans announced by Liz Kendall, the Work and Pension Secretary, yesterday to get people back to work, we are determined to grow the economy and to work in partnership with business to do that. So yes, we've had to make some difficult decisions, but that provides the stability and the platform that we need to move forward. But at the same time, through Mansion House, through the Investment Summit, and indeed those decisions I made in my first week as Chancellor are about beginning to unlock that investment that is vital to turn around the poor productivity and growth performance that we've seen this last decade or so.
So, look, thank you. Come back to the last part of the question. What is it people should be looking for in terms of it starting to work? What are going to be the first signs of it starting to work?
That in the end, you're going to judge us on whether the economy grows. And the economy will only grow if that vital ingredient of investment returns. And our investment performance, both public and private investment as a share of GDP, has lagged behind our competitors over a number of years now. And we need to bring that investment back to Britain. That's why the International Investment Summit was so important. £63 billion of investment into Britain. That investment could go to any country around the world. Investors chose Britain as the place to put that investment, whether it was in new data centres, investments in technology, investments in clean energy, investments in life sciences or creative industries. In a range of sectors, big investors chose Britain at that summit. And I want you to judge this government on our number one mission, which is to bring growth back to the UK economy. We can't do that overnight. If I had promised that during the election campaign, if I'd promised that in my first couple of months in the job, you'd say that's unrealistic. But over this Parliament, we're going to return investment, we're going to return growth to the economy, because in the end, that's the only way to ensure that Britain is competitive, to ensure that we punch our weight in the world, to improve living standards for working people, and to properly fund the public services that I want to see improved as well.
All right, thank you. So, you've mentioned the budget. You'll read the media, listen to the news. We're in a room full of business leaders, so it's probably quite likely there are a number of people in here thinking in some ways some of the measures announced in the budget are actually going to make it more difficult for growth. How would you respond to that?
I'll come back to that point about the options that I faced. I don't think anyone in this room would deny that there was a big black hole in the public finances. We can see that every month when public finance data is published, that government spending is running well ahead of the forecasts that the Office of Budget Responsibility put out in March this year. And the reason why government spending is running ahead is that the previous government did not put out there in the public domain all of the spending that was happening. And so we had to wipe the slate clean and ensure that our public finances were on a firm footing and that our public services were properly funded. And if I hadn't have done that, I'm afraid that we would have had a return to the instability and the uncertainty that has plagued our economy for far too long. And we saw what happened just a couple of years ago when a government was not honest and realistic about the gap between the money coming in and the money being spent. I'm not going to be that sort of Chancellor. I'm going to be honest and level with people about the scale of the challenges that we face and also take the action needed to put those problems right. But we've done that now, and businesses can now be certain that we're never going to have to do a budget like that again. We have now got out into the open all the pressures on public finances and on public services, and we've set the spending envelope for the course of this Parliament. So public services now need to live within the means that we've set. That will have to be done through reform. And one thing I will be knocking on the door of many of you about is how we can do reform well in the public sector, because there's not been enough reform these last few years. We're still running public services in the way that you ran your businesses a decade or so ago. We've got a lot to learn from the best innovation in the private sector to reform and improve our public services and get better value for money, frankly, for the taxpayer. But we've done all of that now. And so while the decisions were difficult, I do believe it was better to do all of that in one go rather than to do half a job this year and then leave uncertainty hanging over all of you for another year when I come back for more. haven't done that. We have now wiped the slate clean. You can be confident that we're not going to have to come back again and do another budget like this. So you can be confident about the tax rates we've set for this Parliament. And public services now need to live within the means that we've set them.
Okay, good. Thank you. So, the run-up to the election and after the election, the Labour Party and you and the Prime Minister and others clearly went on a huge big engagement with business and wanted to engage with business. And I've heard you say many times, this is all about being in partnership between government and business. That's how we generate the growth. Okay. Budgets, by their nature, people end up feeling a budget's been done to them. That's probably just the process of a budget. But coming up, we've got an industrial strategy. We've got a how to unlock investment in infrastructure. We've got labour reform, skills agenda. Those are big opportunities for business and government to work together. So how are you going to ensure that that's seen as a true partnership? What's the best way for people to get involved and engage with you and the rest of the government in those?
Yeah. So first of all, look, it is the nature of budgets that you can't announce or consult in the way over tax rates that you can with other policies. I think the thing that I was proudest of in the budget was what we've been able to do around capital spending because of the fiscal rules that we've set out. The stability rule, so that for the first time this government is committing to balance day-to-day spending through tax receipts. That's incredibly important for me because I don't think you should be borrowing to fund day-to-day costs of running government. But then the investment rule, to get debt down as a share of GDP, but to count the financial assets on the government's balance sheet, not just the costs. So looking at the benefits of investment and not just the costs. And that has unlocked £100 billion additional capital spending during this Parliament that we wouldn't have otherwise have seen. And that will be spending on energy projects, on transport projects, on R&D and technology, and also ensuring that our hospitals and our schools are properly maintained. And if we hadn't have done that, public sector net investment as a share of GDP would have fallen from around 2.5% to 1.6%. And instead, it will stay at those levels of around 2.5% for the duration of this Parliament. I think that of all the things we did in the budget, that has the potential to have the biggest impact on crowding in private investment and improving our infrastructure so that we can compete globally on energy projects, transport projects, and data and technology and much more besides. But in those other areas, the modern industrial strategy, we've already announced the chair, Claire Barkley from Microsoft. We've been making more announcements about the composition of that Industrial Strategy Council in due course. We are now consulting on the 8 priority areas for the modern industrial strategy. I'm doing that in the Treasury for financial services, but in all of the other areas, whether it's advanced manufacturing, life sciences, the energy sector, we're consulting now ahead of publishing that industrial strategy next year. We are legislation, the second reading of the business rates bill is happening today, but over the course of this year we'll be consulting over the business rates reform. We were already at this budget able to put in £1.6 billion to stop there being that cliff edge of business rates relief, but we want to make sure that the system is fairer and works well, particularly for retail, hospitality and leisure, and also for our smaller businesses. As I said, Liz Kendall has announced plans to get more people back to work on that and also on making work pay. We will continue those consultations to make sure that we get the policy right, because I'm a firm believer that whilst government can legislate, it's going to be up to business to make those investments to help grow the economy, and we have to work in partnership. There is no policy that I don't think can't be improved upon through direct contact with business. So in all of those areas, and on the pensions reform, we've got a slot for pensions legislation in the spring next year. We want to work with business to make sure that we get those policies right. So I think I have worked very closely with a large number of you in the almost 5 months that I've been Chancellor of the Exchequer. I had the opportunity for the 3 years that I was Shadow Chancellor to work with many of you before that, but we want to keep that partnership, we want to keep that engagement in government to make sure that we get the policies right so they work for our economy, so that they work for your businesses, so that we can achieve what I think is now a national mission shared between all of us in this room to grow our economy and realise our potential as a country.
Brilliant. Good. So the message is get involved.
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to go to media questions.
Yes. If I first take a question from Sue from the Telegraph.
Hi, Sue Chan from the Telegraph. Chancellor, as you and Keith have already alluded to, many businesses are disappointed with your maiden budget. In the CBI President's own words, I think many here are feeling milked. Instead of Labour being on the side of business, haven't you betrayed them with your tax raid? And you said in your remarks that you want to draw a line under everything. Does that mean that going forward there will be no more big tax rises on business?
When I became Chancellor of the Exchequer, I faced a massive hole in the public finances. And we saw what happened in the last Parliament when a government lost control of the public finances. And it was ordinary businesses and families with higher borrowing costs and with that premium for instability who paid the price. I'm not going to be that sort of Chancellor. I faced a problem and I faced into it. And we've now drawn a line under the fiction peddled by the previous government. We've put our public finances back on a firm footing, and we've now set the budgets for public services for the duration of this Parliament. Public services now need to live within their means, because I'm really clear, I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. And that is why, at this budget, we did wipe the slate clean to put public finances and public services on a firm footing. And as a result, we won't have to do a budget like this ever again. And indeed, unlike the last government, I will only be doing one budget a year so that this government can focus on what our #1 priority is, and that's growing the economy. I take a question now from Ashley from The Sun.
Hi, thank you, Chancellor. Ashley Armstrong from The Sun. Following on from Sue's comment, I mean, one of the things I've been hearing is that you're very comfortable in the city, Mansion House. You got a great reform, but great reception. But in terms of ordinary, traditional British businesses, which are kind of have the touch point with British customers on a daily basis, they're the ones who notice when the price of a pint goes up or the loaf of bread goes up. They're the big employers. And they're the ones that are being told that actually the cost of hiring and keeping staff is going to be so much more expensive. And you're looking to them for growth. So I guess when you're going for growth, why are you targeting these traditional businesses, which are the big employers and the ones that ordinary Brits use on a daily basis?
Thanks very much for that question, Ashley. I'm not immune to the challenges that business face, including the challenges from higher taxes. But the alternative was instability hanging over us for another year, with people asking, and rightly so, the question, well, how are you going to make your sums add up? The sums now do add up after a number of years when, frankly, they didn't. We've brought out into the light everything that was being covered up by the previous government so that businesses can be confident that we now have our sums adding up. And I'll just also say this. On national insurance contributions, the increase in the employment allowance from £5,000 to £10,500 means that 1 million small businesses, half of all businesses, are paying either less national insurance or the same national insurance as they were before the budget, because you can now employ more people, have a higher wage bill before you start paying national insurance at all. And those small businesses, therefore, have a chance to grow and to take on more workers. And from April, you'll be able to employ the equivalent of 4 people at the national living wage full-time before you have to pay any national insurance whatsoever. And so this budget did look at how we could support smaller businesses. Now, I do recognise the challenges that businesses will face, but we had to make sure that the sums added up. Otherwise, we would be in a situation where the cost of borrowing would continue at elevated levels rather than the falls in interest rates that we saw the week after the budget, and where businesses would continue to put back investment not knowing what government's plans were. Everyone now can be certain that we've done what it takes to put our public finances and our public services on a firm footing. I'll take the last question from the media from Joel Hills from ITV.
Hello, Chancellor. I wonder about unintended consequences. Talking to some firms, and there's a mix of views I sense from businesses actually about your budget, but it is quite clear that some firms in some sectors do feel they're exposed in perhaps a way that you didn't intend. The CBI says that it surveyed businesses and half of them plan to let workers go as a result of your budget. Will you rethink any of the measures that you've announced?
It's really important that the sums add up, and I'm determined to be the chancellor that puts our public finances on a firm footing after all the instability that we've faced these last few years. We've made our decisions. I've had lots of feedback on the budget, but what I haven't heard is any credible alternatives to what I did to put our public finances on a firm footing. And if you take the measures in the budget in the round, the Office for Budget Responsibility say that unemployment falls, employment levels rise, wages rise, real household disposable incomes increase over the course of this Parliament. So if you take the measures that I set out in the budget in the round, it's good for jobs and it's good for growth.
Good. Perfect. Right. Thank you. Now, if you think myself and the media have missed the key issues altogether, please, this is your opportunity now. So we'll have a question here.
Sorry, one more from the media, Sky News. Chancellor, you say you won't be coming back for more, that the spending envelope has been set, but under your current plans, some departments after this year will experience real terms cuts to their budget. So are you fine with that?
Well, first of all, you can't be in a position to say that because we haven't set departmental budgets for beyond 25, 26, as you know. We'll be doing that in the second phase of the spending review, and work will get going soon on that, and we'll be publishing the second phase of the spending review in spring next year. But what I am really clear about, and I've said it already a couple of times today, that public services now need to live within the envelope that we've set. We will not be coming back to top up those budgets. We have set the envelope for public spending, and it's through reform and through economic growth that we need to be able to properly fund our public services and to improve living standards for ordinary families.
Good. Now all the media are going to behave themselves and not stick their hands up. Fine. We have a question just here.
Thank you. Jo Bibby from the Health Foundation. We're concerned with the impact of poor working age health on productivity and growth. There's 2.8 million people out of work on health grounds. There's 3.8 million people in work with poor health. So you've talked about wanting to boost growth, but without addressing this working age health challenge, it's going to be a struggle. And we see time and again how the investment we need in prevention gets squeezed by the acute spending demands. So I'm interested, do you think this is a time to start now looking at different rules for prevention spending as a government, as you do for capital, and what incentives can you give employers to put worker health at the top of their agenda?
Well, thank you very much for that question, Jo. And I hope you can see from the work that we're doing across government in Department of Health and Social Care, Work and Pensions, and also in education, that we are a government that's trying to be joined up and tackle some of these deep-rooted challenges that we face. Included in the budget was £22.6 billion for health spending, including money to get those waiting lists down, because there are many people of all ages who are on health waiting lists and as a result aren't available for work, and we need to get those people off waiting lists and back into work, as well as tackling the big challenge we face in mental health, which is keeping many people out of the workplace. And that's why the white paper that we'll be publishing to get Britain working will be across work and pensions, skills and health. So for the first time, to have a joined up piece of work that addresses the myriad reasons for that rising sickness bill and taking a cross-government approach to help people stay in the workplace, as you rightly say, but also help people get back to work through both skills and health interventions to make that possible.
Perfect. We've got a question over here.
Thank you. Natasha Thomas from Sage, a UK FTSE technology company. We welcome the announcement in the budget that the government's National Technology Advisor is now going to move ahead and lead a review on barriers to adopting technology. So will the government take this opportunity now to move quickly towards a really ambitious strategy for the UK to become a highly digitalised economy? So, for example, setting targets for cloud and AI adoption, but also aligning with Asia and Europe to move towards e-invoicing, which leads to faster payment, better access to finance, and ultimately actually easier sustainability reporting for UK SMEs.
Thank you very much for that question, Natasha. Peter Kyle at the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology is leading this work. And there's three key strands to it. The first of all is about attracting those firms that are at the cutting edge of technology to Britain. And that's why at the International Investment Summit in October, we were so pleased to announce significant investment, for example, in data centres and in the tech space, because we want that cutting edge investment here in Britain. And it's brilliant that Demis Hassabis is going to be getting the Nobel Prize, I think, next week for the work that he's done at DeepMind. And keeping DeepMind in Britain has been absolutely crucial for creating that sort of ecosystem for those high-tech sectors. The second thing, which is what you touched upon, is about diffusion of technology through the wider economy. And I'll just come back to that in a second. But the third is about how we can use technology and AI better in public services. And I'm really determined to do this, because one of the things that's really frustrated me in the first few months in this job is that if we want to tackle fraud in the welfare system, or indeed in HMRC, then I'm told we've got to put a load more money in to have people who are manually chasing up these cases, rather than investing in technology, which is, I expect, what many of your businesses do, to root out that fraud. And we need, as a government, to be doing much more to embrace cutting-edge technologies, to improve the service that we deliver to the customers of government services, but also to reduce the costs. And as I said earlier, there's a huge amount that I want to learn from business to do that, because, frankly, government is behind the curve when it comes to this. But the point that you make is absolutely crucial for driving up productivity through the wider economy, because we see technology everywhere, but we don't seem to see it in the productivity numbers. And that is because, and Andy Haldane has sort of set this out really well, both when he was chief economist at the Bank of England and since when he's been at the RSA, that we've got this long tail of businesses with low productivity. And if we can spread that diffusion of technology, which I know that's something that Sage, with the work that you do with small businesses, is absolutely keyed into, if we can do that, we have a chance of lifting both our productivity performance and therefore our growth numbers, but also, crucially, the incomes of working people. And I want to work with businesses like Sage to do that. And I know that Peter Kyle and Matt Clifford and Patrick Vallance and others in government are really determined to make sure that not only are we attracting businesses at the frontier of technology, but we're also diffusing that technology, as you say, Natasha, through the wider economy.
Right, fantastic. Thank you. So we're going to wrap up in just a minute. We're going to just finish on my favourite topic, which is optimism, as you know. Okay, being a Scotland fan, you have to be optimistic in life. Otherwise, it's just not worthwhile living. So, you've done the difficult stuff. You've done the budget. You've taken the hard decisions. You've faced up to the criticism. But what's really, really important, I always think, for the future, for the economy, for growth, for investment, for business, is optimism and having confidence, because investment will flow in the back of confidence. So when you look at where we are now, what's your sort of grounds for optimism and grounds for a confident future?
So I'm hugely optimistic about Britain and our potential to grow and bring good jobs paying decent wages here, and for us to be increasingly competitive on the global stage. We've got so much going for us as a country, whether it's our cutting-edge industries in life sciences, technology, our brilliant universities and entrepreneurs. But we all know, and this sort of builds on Natasha's point, that we need to see that cutting-edge innovation really run through our whole economy, through businesses big and small. And government has got to play its part, but but it's only one part and a small part compared to the heavy lifting that businesses need to do. But what government can do is to create the conditions to encourage that business investment. First of all, that's providing that rock of stability so that businesses can look to the future with confidence, knowing that the rules of the game have been set, and they now have been. But also the work that we can do to remove those barriers that are stopping you if you're investing. Whether it's because it takes too long to get things through the planning system, whether it's because as an entrepreneur, you find it much easier to raise finance in the US than you do in the UK, and so you gradually shift towards the US rather than listing and keeping your intellectual property here in the UK. Whether it is struggling to access the skills, either because, as Joe says, there are too many people trapped out of work because of sickness and ill health, or because we're not open enough to global talent from around the world. And it's my job as Chancellor to really corral the whole of government to be thinking every day about what we can do to remove the barriers that stop investment or delay investment into Britain. And whether it's the announcements that I made in my first week as Chancellor on planning and pensions, whether it is the £63 billion that we brought in at the International Investment Summit, whether it's the Mansion House speech and regulating for growth, not just regulating for risk, or indeed whether it's what we did at the budget in returning stability to the economy, this government have already got started in less than 5 months to do the things that I know are necessary for unlocking growth. And I want to work with all of you to fulfil our potential as a country, to make this the best place to start a business, to grow a business and to invest in. And together, working together, I know that we can do just that.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you again for coming along. And if we could all join in saying thank you to the Chancellor. Thank you.